Welcome to the IADS Retail Park. I'm your host, Maya. Now, de Bijenkorf means the beehive. The name comes with an expectation, activity, density, something alive. The Rotterdam store has 155 years of history behind it. Marcel Breuer's protected post-war building beneath its feet, Gucci, Saint Laurent, and Louis Vuitton in full shop-in-shop format on the ground floor, and over 200 million euros invested in premium transformation since 2013. It also just cut 167 jobs, despite being profitable. Today we're going inside. Christine, our Director of Markets and Events here at IADS, wrote this week's exclusive and visited the store in early 2026. Now, Christine, you sent me photographs before the piece went live. The building is unique. Tell me what it was like to actually be in it.
The building does something to you before you reach the selling floors. Breuer's original lobby still has that quality of space that modern retail fit-outs usually destroy. High ceilings, considered proportions, a sense that someone thought carefully about what it would feel like to arrive. So you walk in already primed for something significant. And then on the floor, that feeling is not quite matched. The execution is genuinely good. The brand mix is well judged. The shop-in-shops for Gucci, Saint Laurent, and Louis Vuitton are full, properly signed, staffed. The layouts across all 5 floors are airy and clean. By the measures we'd normally use to evaluate a department store, Rotterdam performs.
I see. So there's a moment of arrival. The building sets up a promise, and then the floor delivers the brands, but not the event of being there.
Yes, Maya, that's exactly it. You're in this extraordinary space and you're not quite sure what you're supposed to do with the visit beyond shop. There's no seasonal campaign orienting you, no pop-up pulling you to a different floor. I spent time on all 5 selling floors, and the experience of the third was essentially the same as the experience of the second.
That's actually a telling sign. When every floor reads the same, there's no hierarchy of discovery. Nothing is making you want to go further in.
Yeah, for sure. Though I'd push that slightly further. The floors aren't identical, the categories shift, the brand mix is distinct, the home floor above is well conceived. But there's no thread connecting them, no seasonal logic that makes the visit feel like it needs to go in any particular direction.
You spent time specifically looking at services. What did you find?
This is the part that stayed with me most. The Bijenkorf offers sneaker cleaning, alteration, made to measure, and very important person appointments for Gucci, Saint Laurent, and Louis Vuitton. Those last 3, personal shopping and VIP appointments for 3 luxury labels, are a real differentiator in any premium department store context. None of them are signed on the floor. I walked all 5 selling floors and I did not see a single piece of directional signage for any of those services. They're advertised on the website. They exist and I could verify that. But if you're a customer who walked in off the cool single, there's no version of this visit where you discover them.
And these aren't minor add-ons. Very important person appointments for Gucci in your store. That's a relationship service. That's the kind of thing that brings a customer back on the 4th and 5th visit. The fact that it's invisible is a communication problem more than a retail problem.
Which is what makes it such an actionable gap. The investment is already in place. De Bijenkorf has spent the last decade building a genuinely premium brand mix. The next question is what generates return visits? And the services are a direct answer to that, but only if people know they exist.
What about seasonal programming? When you were there in early 2026, was anything running?
There was a theme, Mac Plaisir, which translates loosely as have fun, that appeared in the windows and on a handful of display columns on the ground floor. And that's where it ended. I went up to the fashion floors, the home floor, the beauty hall. Nothing referenced it. The campaign theme didn't travel through the store. There was also a Ramadan table in the men's basement, a kiosk on the women's floor, mixing Stanley cups and Asulane travel books. Interesting moments individually, but they're isolated, initiatives that different teams activated without a central seasonal logic binding them together.
So the seasonal campaign stops at the window and the cross selling stops at the fixture. Neither becomes something you actually move through.
Yes, and the two problems are related, Maya. When there's no seasonal logic traveling through the building, the cross selling has no thread to attach to. You get pockets of activity instead of a story.
You use Bloomingdale's as the benchmark in the exclusive. Tell me about that choice.
Bloomingdale's from Italy with Love launched in September 2024 and ran for 2 months. It was a themed retail event built around Italy, a mercato pop-up selling gourmet Italian products, Roman column installations throughout the flagship, travel poster, visual merchandising floor to floor. 2 months of programming that gave the entire store a reason to exist at that specific moment in time.
And the point here isn't that de Bijenkorf should be running a Rome theme in Rotterdam.
Not at all. The point is the scale of ambition. Bloomingdale's didn't add one themed corner, it programmed the whole building. Breuer's building in Rotterdam is a more significant piece of architecture than the Bloomingdale's flagship on 59th Street. And right now it's running a campaign that stops before it reaches the second floor.
Rotterdam was specifically chosen to signal something. The city was rebuilding itself from the ground up after the war, and Breuer was commissioned to put something significant at the center of it. Christine, I gotta be honest, there's something uncomfortable about that building sitting this quiet.
Which is what makes it such a useful case for the sector. It's not the store that's struggling, it's not poorly run. It's a store with extraordinary assets that hasn't yet asked what those assets are capable of.
The job cuts at the beginning of 2026 came alongside a return to profitability. That combination is unusual. How do you read it?
It's the latest in a sequence. Since the Selfridges Group acquisition in 2011, there have been repeated reorganizations and multiple CEO transitions. Matti Svish stepped down in 2024 after fewer than 6 months in the role, and the ownership structure has been under significant strain since Selfridges Group's own financial difficulties from 2022 onwards. What the January announcement tells you is that profitability is being used to fund efficiency, not to fund investment, which is a defensible short-term position and a complicated long-term.
Because you're protecting margin at the exact moment you need to be funding the perishable layer.
And the perishable layer is precisely what doesn't appear in a quarterly P&L until you've missed several seasons of it. A well-executed seasonal campaign is difficult to attribute directly to revenue. What you eventually measure is declining dwell time, lower return visit frequency, reduced cross-category basket size. By the time those numbers move, Maya, you've already lost the window.
And that's the version of this conversation that extends well beyond de Bijenkorf. The permanent versus perishable split is a capital allocation question that every department store leadership team is sitting with right now.
The ratio is telling. The stores building genuine return visit frequency are the ones treating the perishable layer as seriously as the permanent one. Selfridges in its strongest years, Bloomingdale's with its themed programming, Roninger with its cultural partnerships. These are stores spending meaningfully on the layer that expires, because they understand that's the layer that brings people back.
Christine, if you had 1 hour with whoever controls the seasonal programming budget at de Bijenkorf, what's the first thing you'd say?
Make the services visible today. That requires no new investment. The services already exist. Sneaker cleaning, alteration, VIP appointments, put them on the floor. Sign them properly. Integrate them into the merchandising. That's the correction with the lowest cost and the most immediate effect on how the store feels to a customer who's considering a return visit. After that, build a seasonal campaign calendar that programs Breuer's building as a stage, not one corner of it, the whole building. The name gives you the brief. What does a beehive look like when it's actually buzzing? When every floor has an answer to that question at the same moment, you have a destination.
And the name carries 155 years of equity. When de Bijenkorf decides what its version of buzzing looks like, it has the building, the brands, and the customer base to carry it. That's a better starting position than most retailers in Europe.
The honest version is that the assets are extraordinary. The work ahead is making them feel that way to the person walking in off the street.
Christine, the beehive metaphor is going to stay with me. Thank you for the conversation.
It's a store worth spending time in. There's a lot to learn from what it hasn't done yet. It was my pleasure, Maya. Thanks for having me. See you next time.
The full IADS exclusive on de Bijenkorf Rotterdam, store photography from all 5 floors and Christine's complete piece, is on our Substack this week. Everything we referenced in this episode is linked in the description below. If the de Bijenkorf story raises a question about your own context, the service communication, the seasonal programming, the permanent versus perishable balance, that's the conversation we're here for. You can find us at www.iads.org or on LinkedIn at International Association of Department Stores. Next time you're in a premium store that executes everything correctly, look for what isn't signed. That's usually where the story is. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya, and we'll be back soon with the next story from the retail world. This podcast uses AI clone voices created with human oversight to ensure quality and accuracy.